Shalom, my friends. Shalom, my enemies. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And it is such a delight for me to be talking to our guest in the neighborhood live on this Shabbos, August 6, 2023. This handsome fella there and this even more handsome surrounding there. He is Mark Steven Porro. Now, he did some acting. He was also doing tons of stuff in Hollywood for about 2 decades or so. And then, and this still boggles my mind, you know where I want to go? I'm living in Hollywood, I'm acting, I'm in TV, I want to go to New Jersey. He does this to be with his mama, who is, she's old, she's not doing so well. So he goes there to take care of her for a while. And then she passes, and now as you can see, he is in gorgeous France. I mean, yeah, they collaborated. They were not so great in World War II, but still, it's France. So he's there now, all the way internationally from, is it Paris, or where are you, Mark?
I'm in the southwest. It's a village of Molière.
Really? Oh my gosh. He did his shows there? He lived there? He was born there or what?
Well, you would think he built the place the way they celebrate him here, but he lived here for a few years, and they say that Molière was born here because he wrote some of his greatest plays while he was in Pézenas. So he wrote, I believe, The Misanthrope and Tartuffe when he was here.
And what was it? Where are you? Pézenas?
Pézenas. We pronounce the S's, at least in the South. So it's between Béziers and Béziers and Montpellier.
Oh,
and it's about 20 minutes from the sea. And it's got architectural, political, and art history here. It's really a very cool, very artsy village.
It sounds
and the wine ain't bad. It's the largest wine growing region in the world.
Not a patch on Manischewitz. I'm sorry, but just not a patch on the Manny, the extra sweet Concord grape. Nothing like that in the whole disgusting world. But let me ask you, so is that an image of your house behind you, or is that actually your house behind you?
This is part of my house. This is my, I would say, the grand room, which is the living room.
And grand it certainly is. I mean, it's just, oh my God.
High ceilings, low floors. And we got 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. And the building, they say, was built around 1540. So we're heading towards 500 years.
Well, I have to say, those lamps of yours, for being like 500 years old, they look in amazing condition. How do you do this?
We have a nice mix of old and new. So the eclectic touches me. I have a design background, so I designed. So some of the, like the table back there, the very large table, that's antique. That's bought locally. So any of the old stuff is local,
right? And
any of the new stuff pretty much came from Los Angeles.
And the brick, though, is from like 1600s. That brick,
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, they did some repair works and stuff, but it is absolutely cool. And then out the window there, well, you can't really see it now, but I mean, just looking at the old stones and the cobblestone streets, you could just imagine the history on those things.
I can't really look at the old stones because Mick Jagger, it's just one big wrinkle. And Keith, he's a skeleton. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, Mark Steven Porro, you mentioned industrial design because that was your bent before acting, before the other stuff. So you have a gift for, what is it, drawing industrial arts? What is industrial design? You've got buildings, what?
From everything from a graphic design. So back in the old days, it used to be called logos and corporate identity. And then interior design was part of the discipline. So like designing this space. And then also product design, anything from designing a pen to a hair dryer, to a washing machine, to a tractors and things like that. That's all.
You designed a tractor?
I was part of teams that did that. I stayed mainly in the graphic design, and then that moved into internet design and web design and interactive design. So that has changed quite a bit over the last couple of decades.
So were you early on in developing websites and remaking it. Did you start doing that like the 90s or something, or what?
I guess, yeah, I think my first job was in um, like 1981, my first design job. And so we got one of the first Apple computers, which was, I think, the Apple II. And you could barely do anything on this thing. I mean, when a Macintosh came out and I could draw a box, that was a huge win. But it took hours. And then once in a while, once you got it in there, and then you could repeat the boxes. So that was a very cool thing. But in the beginning, it was very labor intensive. It was a lot quicker just to draw the old fashioned way and set type the old fashioned way and print the old fashioned way. Now it's just ridiculous how fast you can do things.
Of course. So do you, over the past bunch of years, even when you were acting, were you still doing web work? Were you doing design work, or did you give
I was doing a lot of, yeah, I kept designing because designing was the paying job. Acting was, as you may know, is not the most steady work in the world. And I gave up a good design career to, I'm an adventurer. So I had this acting bug. Early on, I had, my mom loved the arts. And so our whole family was involved with the ballet. And so I think I got the acting bug from that. And then I had my actual film debut when I was about 8 years old. My brother got a Super 8 Bell & Howell camera, and he wanted to film Adam in the Garden of Eden in our house. So in the vestibule of our house, we took it was, I think in the wintertime, we took every artificial plant that we had, we filled up the vestibule, and then he put a plastic leaf that was well placed but not well secured on his 8-year-old little brother.
You're right, yeah.
And during filming, the leaf dropped.
All right.
And I quit the business in shame.
Well, actually, I have to wonder if was that film ever developed? Did your family get phone calls as like, you're making child porn here? We're going to send some people over to check out your mom and dad.
Well, back then, luckily, the internet didn't exist. So it was developed, and my father, I think, asked my brother to destroy it, and I don't think he did. So this thing may resurface sometime if people want to get some revenge on me.
But the acting bug didn't leave you, because really honest, it came back at some point. In your 20s or 30s, when?
I went to Hollywood just after I turned 26. And my goal, I went to school at the Ohio State University. That's where I got my degree in design. And I worked for a couple of really good design. It was called Richardson Smith at the time. It was one of the best design firms in the country. So that was a lovely career if I stuck with it. But I went to Hollywood to visit, and I had a connection with an agent. And I decided to move out there, and I had a design job waiting for me because I had a great portfolio and good experience. But I quit that after a year because I started landing acting work. My goal was to get, at that time, Hill Street Blues was a very well-respected show. And my goal was I wanted to be good. So I got out there and I started studying right away. And my goal was Hill Street Blues. And I got on Hill Street Blues in 1986. I think in their 8th or 9th season. It might have been their last season.
But was it a one shot, or did you got on as a one episode, or did you land?
One episode. I was ADA Simmons, and I had a courtroom scene, a couple of courtroom scenes, one with Veronica Hamill, who was like the hottest thing on TV at the time. And the judge was Jeffrey Tambor.
Oh, yeah.
And Tambor, later on, we both studied at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. So he was a guest instructor. When the main guy, Milton, didn't show up, Jeffrey substituted. He was a great teacher, but we had a lot of fun because, I said, this, because I played a lawyer in my first scene at the Playhouse, and he was the teacher. So he critiqued it. And I introduced myself. I said, we've met before. We were on Hill Street Blues together. And he said, was I nice? And I said, yes, you were. Some of the other people weren't so nice, but a very funny story with that. So it was my first episode in television, episodic television, and it went really long. And when things go long and you're a SAG actor, you get paid very well. So it goes into double time if you're past 8 hours. Then it goes into double overtime. And then I think if it's after 11 hours, you go into golden time. So you're making a fortune, at least for me, for my first gig. And in the courtroom, there was this old gentleman, had to be in his 80s, and he was there the entire time, having the best time of his life. So during a break, I sat with him and I asked him, I said, you have to have better things to be doing with these last years of your life. And he said, no, he goes, I love being around you young people, you creative people. It just tickles me. And I said, that is so cool. And then he introduced himself. He says, my daughter owns this studio. And I said, who's your daughter? He says, Mary Tyler Moore.
So wait, was that Grant Tinker?
No. Well, that was her husband.
I'm so sorry.
Mary MTM Studios was on Radford, and that was, they did Hill Street Blues, they did St. Elsewhere, and a bunch of other big shows. And that studio was owned by Mary Tyler Moore. And her father just liked hanging out on the set because he loved being, I guess, around his daughter, who we didn't see, but he just loved the energy and stuff that.
I do want to ask you, because you dropped a hint in there, and you're not really acting anymore, so it's no harm if you. So who was not so nice on the Hill Street Blues crew?
Can I say the names? I guess I can't be sued. What's gonna happen? So the guy that played, his name was Bruce Weitz, the detective.
Yeah, Felker.
Yeah. So I had a scene with him, and it might have been he was just in character, but he was just nasty.
Really?
I mean, some of the
Someone
guys.
was just talking about him honest to God. Last week we had on the program Michael Tucker. I don't know if you know that actor. He's married.
Okay, yeah. I saw that. Yeah,
and he had a. Literally, we're talking about NYPD, and he was on NYPD, and he was saying wonderful things about Bruce Weitz. So maybe he just goes into the Belker character.
He could have, or sometimes you catch somebody on a bad day. I try to give everybody a break, but Veronica Hamill was very sweet. Tambor was very nice, and of course, Mary Tyler Moore's dad was very nice, and the makeup guys were great because they knew it was my first gig. So when you're getting made up, you're in your costume, and they put tissues around your neck so you don't get makeup on your collar before shooting. So I said, do I leave these in? They said, yeah, you leave them in. So I'm on the set, and I'm walking around the set, and I've got these tissues hanging out, and everybody's looking at me. And then I look over and I see the makeup guys, and they're just cracking up.
Oh, they were.
Yeah,
that's cute. I love that.
So I pulled it out, and it's great to. I mean, I wasn't mad. It was fun. I got a kick out of it, and they got a kick out of it. So a smile goes a long way in Hollywood. So who are in the other episodics and the other stuff that you did? Because you do have some credits on IMDb. Who are great people that you really enjoyed working with, whose names we know? Like who was really cool or fun or nice or. Well, I'll say the nicest guy was I had a small part on Castaway, which I'm still making good money on. So everything you've heard about Tom Hanks is true. He's a total a-hole. Absolutely. He stayed on the set and hung out with all of us. He gave Robert Zemeckis some ideas to save some money. I'm joking. He was a charmer. He called me. We in the crash scene of that. I was in the beginning of the film, but I replaced the original navigator. So they have a thing where if a character is established, even if he's replaced, your face can't be seen because it would be confusing to the audience. So a guy who I replaced, I knew him, a guy by the name of Jay. So I came in. So the whole crash sequence and dialogue and stuff is me. But every time I tried to turn to the camera where Tom Hanks was behind me, Robert Zemeckis would say, cut. He goes, Mark, you can't turn to the camera. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm in a movie with Tom Hanks, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and nobody's going to know I'm in it. And so he laughed and we laughed, but I couldn't turn. So I think in the trailer, if you know what you're looking for, you could see it's my profile. But that's as far as I could go. And then you'll see stuff like this. And then all the dialogue with the mask is me. And then we get hit with 10,000 gallons of water and we're dead.
I was up for the ball, by the way. I auditioned for the ball and didn't get it.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, I was going to be a left ball too. And they said, no, we're not shooting Hanks below the waist. So it didn't, you're not even.
Well, Wilson, that was typecasting for Wilson. It was terrible.
It was Damon Wilson who actually played him. No, but let me ask, who else? Who else was really wonderful in your adventures?
I did an episode. Actually, the first time I got fired was I was got cast in Golden Girls, and those ladies are lovely, but they were old, and they were old in makeup. And when you saw them first thing in the morning, oh my God, I'm like in my early 30s, and I'm with these ancient women, but they were lovely. And Betty White is a sweetheart. I met her before because she and I shared a hairdresser. And everything you've heard about Betty White too, she's just lovely. And so I would see her actually in Beverly Hills at the salon every once in a while. And one time, whenever my mom came out from New Jersey, I would take her for a shampoo and set with Stan Penner at Penner Salon in Beverly Hills. And mom got to sit in the chair that Betty White sat in. And then one day Betty was there when my mother was there. And so my mother got an autograph from Betty White, which was a big thrill for her.
Big thrill for anybody. I mean, not just her. But let me ask you though, all we read are stories about how B. Arthur didn't get along with White, or you didn't see that. You saw them all.
No, I didn't see that. I wasn't with them long enough. You're there for about 3 days. So again, you may have caught them on a good day or a bad day, or they tried to hide that. I will tell you on the, I did Webster, and Webster was Emmanuel Lewis, right? He was the star of the show, but the people who played his parents, I'm not going to mention their names because I think.
Does anybody even remember who the hell they were? No,
I'll just say they were, at least the gentleman was lucky to be working. And when you see people who get a lucky break and they don't appreciate it, it's a shame because it's tough to get a job and it's tough to maintain a job in Hollywood. It's a tough business. So enjoy it and enjoy the people around you. So he was an ex-football player. And on that show was James Worthy, who was on the Lakers at the time. And I was there, and he was not nice at all to James. You have two professional athletes, and it was just a cold shoulder to James Worthy. And it was a shame because James wasn't an actor, but he was trying his best, and he was a great guy. And this guy was just a son of a gun. And I think the thing was they were so angry that Emmanuel Lewis was the star of the show, and they thought they should have been the star of the show. And so it's a shame. And also, the couple were really married, but they were actually going through a divorce when I got hired. So I was warned ahead of time. They said that set is very tense because of what's going on with the two leads. And they said, you go on the set, you do your job, and you go to your dressing room. Get away from that because it's crazy. So you don't know what's going to happen. So,
was that the worst set you were on in terms of studio television or a semi-major film?
I would have to say that was probably the most tense set. Yeah.
What was the best set? Well, Castaway, I guess, but
Castaway was great because I was only there for 3 days, and you're working with Zemeckis and Hanks, and then Spielberg showed up for 2 of those days. So you have this one scene where Zemeckis is in the front of the plane, going through the choreography of the crash sequence. So he's up there directing, and the whole behind him or in front of him was the crew and the cast. And so we're watching him do his whole little dance of what's going to happen. I look over and I see this little guy with a home movie camera filming. And I'm looking at him, and it's Steven Spielberg shooting a home movie of Zemeckis kind of directing what's going to happen. And at the end of it, Zemeckis asked everybody, so does anybody have any questions? And Spielberg put down the camera and said, yeah, how much is this sequence costing me?
Because there's a producer.
He's producing, yeah. So he's, so it was a lot of fun. And what was cool about Spielberg, I don't know, you've heard good or bad.
Good.
By contract, you have to get a limo. So he's up in Malibu and he has to be taken to the set. So a limo has to pick him up. He sits in the front seat with the driver. He doesn't do this pretentious thing in the back with the cigars and everything. So I thought that was very cool. But while you're in makeup, you hear the thing going, he's on his way. He's on his
Oh.
way. And then everybody just, like fresh flowers come up. Everybody, the vacuum gets on. Everybody starts cleaning up. And Spielberg arrives sitting with the chauffeur in the front seat.
Nice.
So he's very cool and very relaxed and very nice. I didn't deal with him that much, but you could see that there's no really tension on the set, even though this was a huge budget. And also what was very cool about that movie is while we were shooting, they were editing. So we would go through a sequence and then they would go and sit with the editor right there on the set and say, okay, we got it. We can move on. Or, oh, we need another one with Tom wrapping his Band-Aid around his finger. And another cool thing was there's a sequence where Tom Hanks is doing the thing with the Band-Aid and he's in the little bathroom in the plane. And he had to be hoisted up when the plane first has, I guess, the engine failure. So the plane drops and he has to go to the ceiling. And they were going to wire him up. And it was becoming too complicated. So he said, no, I'll lift up my foot. Someone is on the ground and they throw a box underneath my foot and I will launch myself up. So that saved a ton of time and probably a fortune.
Right, yeah.
Do that. And I don't know if many other actors would be willing to do that. Okay. But, he said, no, let's just get this going. And then you saw the sequence and it looked great. And then they could move on.
Wow. Now, unfortunately, we want to move on because I love hearing these stories about TV and celebrities and people you've worked with. But one of the reasons that you're here is that you moved on from Hollywood. Why? Why did you give that up? I mean, you were getting work. Why did you go to New Jersey?
Well, to be honest, at that point, you age out in Hollywood unless you have a substantial career. So I was in my 50s at the time. And I got a phone call from my brother saying, Mom has just shut down. I put her to bed. The doctor cut off all meds and food, and hospice was called. And my heart almost stopped because last time hospice was called was 14 years earlier with my dad, and he was dead 2 days later. So I flew home and Mom was in her bed. I called it semi-comatose and not talking. Her eyes were closed and she was just kind of sleeping. And it's just like she wanted to check out. So all the kids came home. And my little sister and I slept with her next to her in the bed just to make sure, she didn't need anything, or if she woke up, if that was rare. Once in a while, she did open her eyes, didn't speak a word. She did respond a little bit to touch, but she was just not happy. And then while I was there, I just looked around and I saw that this house, which is the house we all grew up in, we had some people that were living there at that point for about 3.5 years, supposedly caretakers. And they turned this house into their house, which was not a nice house. And my mother's, all of her possessions and all of our family heirlooms and photographs were all sequestered into my mother's room, crammed. So it was crammed with all her stuff. And the rest of the house was these people's junk. So I think my mom, it was I call it in the book, a silent cry for help. And so we were there and we took care of her. And then weeks later, she snapped out of it. And I realized that she didn't like these people. These people didn't like her either, but these people were getting free rent for supposedly doing certain chores and looking after our mother. And so I took over at that point for a number of weeks, and hospice was still there. So I learned all the tips and tricks from hospice. And my little sister did also, but she had to go back because she had a family of 5. I had no kids or anything other than at that point, I had a snack food company in Los Angeles. And
wait, where the hell did that come from?
You got to read the book. It's all in there. But,
by the way, what is the name of the book? Can you hold up the book, please? It's called, and I'll hold up this while you hold up that. It's A Cup of Tea on the Commode, ladies and gentlemen. On the Commode.
Well, that's not going to help sales at all. Thank you, Rabbi.
No, but why is it? I mean, obviously, let's get to the title.
Okay, so
what does it have to do with your mom?
All right, so the title came from, so after my mom woke up, she couldn't walk anymore. So we couldn't get her to the bathroom. So we had a Commode that we used with my father 14 years earlier. So I found that in the basement, cleaned it up, brought it up. And sometimes Mother Nature doesn't go as quickly as you would like. So when she was on the Commode, she spent an inordinate amount of time there. So her favorite beverage was a cup of hot tea, skim milk, no sugar. And so one day I offered it to her and it was a hit. So I tried to make it her experience.
So when you say it was a hit, she loved it, or it got
loved
her,
it.
her
She
bowel
loved it, and it became a regular routine. So so that it was like, Mom, no rush. Just here's your cup of tea. Relax. Let nature take its its time.
Yes.
And
Yes.
So that's where the title comes from.
So first of all, how old was your mom when you got that phone call first?
It was 8 days after her 89th birthday.
How long did she live after that?
Once I took over, she lived till 92 and a half. So 3.5 years.
3.5 years, my God. And all that time, and there was still hospice for 3.5 years, which is.
Well, no, hospice contractually stays there for 6 months, but hospice is called when they know there's going to be a death, basically.
Right.
So after a few months, they realized, no, this woman has come back, and partly because her kids are taking care of her and she's happy again. But they still had to stay on for 6 months. So I was able to go back to Los Angeles while they were still on, because I trusted them. I did not trust the people who were still in the house, and we had to keep them in the house. By Jersey, I tried to get rid of them, but by Jersey law, they were living there long enough where I couldn't kick them out. So we had to make a mutual agreement with them. So they hung on. Well, okay, so that was 2011. And so I went back to LA, I think probably in May this was in February 2011. And so May, I think I went back to LA, came back in September, but Mom and I kept in touch. And at that point we had FaceTime going and things like that, so I could check on her. I came back in September, and everything in the house was right back to where it was before. That sent her on this death wish. So I realized then that we got to get rid of these people, and I've got to step in. So my mother came. Pardon me?
So you shot them? No, I'm kidding.
They're still in the backyard, but how deep, I can't say. So I asked my mom at that point, because I wasn't sure if she wanted me to do this or not. Having a son do all that, because I did everything. So I took care of her for the wedding. I got her all dolled up, and she had a great time at this wedding.
What way? What way?
I came back in September because her youngest grandson was getting married.
Okay.
And so she was in a wheelchair, and we had to take her. This was the first road trip since her near-death experience. So that was all very unusual. I wanted to see how she would handle this, but I took over. I took the wheelchair with me, the Commode with me, and all the stuff that we needed for her, changing her diapers and all that business. And she was so happy at the wedding that I just said, listen, you want me to come back and take care of you to make sure this quality level of care stays the same. And she said, yes. I said, okay, it's done. So I moved back actually in December. I had to close up things at home in LA.
I moved back. Yeah. Well, I have to ask, what snack were you guys making? What was it called?
My dad invented in 1963 the original half-pop popcorn. He called it Nutrinuts. I renamed it Grandpa Poe's Originals, but he came up with a half-popped popcorn. He was a chemist. And at that point in the early 60s, McDonald's was just coming in to popularity. And he wanted his kids to stay away from junk food. So he wanted to come up with a healthy alternative. He was a very clever guy. So he came up with a way. And there's a chapter in the book about it, because I still don't know how he goes, okay, how can I make popcorn only pop halfway? But it became these crunchy golden nuggets just packed with flavor. And it was like he kept it as a family secret. He tried to get it patented on 3 occasions in the 70s and 80s. None of them went through. And then in the mid 80s, he got tired of making it, because it's a pretty involved process and a messy process. And my mother's kitchen was not happy until he stopped cooking it, because oil went everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So in the 90s, early 90s, we started having these family reunions where all the kids and the new my nieces and nephews and stuff. So about 22 of us would get together for a week in a various location back east. And they started hearing these stories about Nutrinuts, but never got to try them. So I asked my dad for the recipe. I said, I'm going to revive this. He gave me the recipe. And the first time I cooked it in LA, I almost burned down my apartment. And that should have been an omen, but no, I kept going. Actually, when you're cooking it, it's, again, very messy. I eventually designed really good equipment to do this, but before this, it was a pot on the stove and oil comes out and it starts going over the side, and then your stove catches on fire. And you have to hold on to the lid because it's popcorn, but a popcorn cooked a special way, it was explosive. So if you open the lid, not only did you get burned, but oil went everywhere. So I'm holding on to the lid while the stove is on fire. I'm blowing out the fire and I'm almost passing out from hyperventilating. And then I start laughing, saying, how am I going to explain this? Or how are the firemen going to explain this, that this guy is laughing, holding on to a pot and he's dead? And again, I kept cooking.
And
and eventually became a national brand. Grandpa Poe's Original started branching out in Los Angeles. And then I was chosen for the snack of the day on the Rachel Ray show. And then we got a national distributor after that. So it went nationwide for a while, but to compete with the big boys, and we were organic, and my father introduced soy into it. So it was mostly popcorn, but he wanted to add some protein, and he loved dry roasted soy nuts when he was a kid. I had no idea. On the streets of New York, you got roasted chestnuts, roasted peanuts, and he said roasted soy nuts in the 20s and 30s, which I never heard of.
Yeah, okay.
And he said, I always liked that taste and had protein, so I wanted to add that. So soy was just, when I started the company, soy was just hitting its stride, and we were organic. And so we were a hot topic for a while, but the big boys started getting into organics and certainly into soy. And sometimes we had trouble finding corn. Sometimes we had trouble finding soy. So it was tough to compete with them. So eventually it was
oh my, I don't know. I still prefer Nutrinuts. Something about the name Nutrinuts.
Well, I like the name too, but it was misleading. There were a lot of people that had nut allergies.
Oh, okay. It was popcorn.
And there's no nuts in there. So
it wasn't corn nuts. So you had it. By the way, I want to say that I would love to stick around, but I have to get back to my shul. Dave is coming. He's going to talk a little more to you and start the trivia game that you're going to stick around for. Don't forget that. That's right. But we have been here with Mark Steven Porro, Porro, and you want to get his book. It's gotten wonderful reviews on Amazon. It's called A Cup of Tea on the Commode. How can people get it, by the way?
It's on Amazon. If they also go to a cup of tea on the commode.org or .com or just Google that. There are a lot of online options. I don't know how many. We have independent distributors, so it should be out in some bookstores, but you may have to order it there. But Amazon's definitely your best bet. You get it quickly there. And it comes in a large print. It comes in ebook and also paperback.
Very thoughtful of you, considering what it's about, having it in large print. Well, in big, large letters, I want to say thank you so much to Mark Steven Porro. Do not go away, because Dave is coming in about half a minute to play the Today Yesterday Trivia Quiz. But I wish you much good things, much success, and nutritive nuts to you for the rest of your life.
Thank you so much.